Okay, on the show today, Emily Wishall. So Emily is an embodiment coach, Rolfer, joining us from Boulder, Colorado. Emily, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
So what deep psychological traumas got you interested in what you do now? That's kind of my half jokey way of introducing the podcast now, but I really kind of like to hear people's stories. You know, how did you get into it?
Yeah, the language of what psychological traumas got me into what I'm doing immediately made my belly drop. So there's, of course, I think for a lot of us, it can be a lot of roundabout ways to how we got to the work that we're doing. But I will say the specific focus of my work right now is a lot of my own story. And so most of my life, I really hated my body. I remember, I think for the first time that I started feeling self-conscious around my body, I was 8 years old. And I am the youngest of 7. I have a huge family. And my older siblings would, go work out or go to the gym. And I remember, like, it was the YMCA in my small hometown where was the gym you could work out at, and figuring out somehow 16 is how old you could be to go work out without a parent or supervisor. And I counted, I was like, okay, I can't wait till I'm 16 and I can go work out. So then I can fix my body. Like, then I can be thin. And, in all of that, where I was coming from was really desiring to be more, like, receive more love and approval. And I thought that if my body looked a certain way, that would help. So sharing that and starting that, because, I've really come to a place where I really genuinely love and enjoy my body, like exactly how my body is. And I get to move to experience pleasure. I get to experience delight in my body every day. Even I just told Mark when we came on, I'm coming off of a cold. So even like, with sickness, just a different, I have a very different relationship with my body. And I think a lot of I have a bachelor's degree in exercise science. As Mark mentioned, I'm a certified Rolfer, have dove into really learning the anatomy, the physiology of the body. I think even in college, when I was studying exercise science, had this like underarching intention that I never vocalized to anyone else, but thinking, okay, if I just really understand the physiology of the physical body, then I can fix my body. Then it'll be easier for me to eat more restricted or work out more. And, but that was usually the motivating factor for me. And I think what really started to propel me into the study of the body. That being said, it was between my sophomore and junior year of college, of university, and I got a job as a personal care attendant for a woman. She was 17 at the time and had cerebral palsy. And so the way she moved about the world was in a motorized wheelchair. And I got to go to her PT, her physical therapy sessions, and learn stretches and movements, and would then be able to support her through the week and doing those stretches and doing those movements. And it amazed me how quickly, 2 or 3 days of consistency gave her so much more independence in her daily activities, meaning even just reaching around and wiping herself after going to the restroom. And so that job, I became friends with her, but really started to motivate me and be inspired by this idea of helping people reach their full potential through the physical body. So I think there was always dual things going on in my head of I was wanting to reach my own full potential. I was wanting to support others through the physical body, as well as there was that little constant ticker tape of, oh, but you're not enough because you need to lose 10 pounds or, be a size 4, whatever it may be, because then you'll be more approved of, then people will take you more seriously. So that's kind of.
Mm-hmm. And for those who don't know, rolfing, hands-on body work, kind of known for being intense. There doesn't have to be, as I understand it. Just kind of giving listeners that it's not everyone, particularly in the UK, might know what that is, and other countries.
Yeah.
So
the word comes from Dr. Ida Rolf. She called it structural integration, which I think is helpful because that actually gives a little bit more reference of what it is. Structural integration is manual work working with the fascia of the body.
And how would you say is your main work now? Is it work around body image? Like, what's your kind of focus right now?
Yeah, my focus is like the main overarching umbrella is around body image, most specifically to help shift the narrative that a woman's worth is tied in or connected into her weight or physical appearance.
Uh-huh.
Um,
And
yeah,
do you work with men as well, or is it exclusively to women? I mean, this
it's
podcast is about.
primarily women. I have in my private Rolfing practice, I have less than a handful of male clients left, but I've mostly referred. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
primarily in my coaching and in my private practice. It's mostly females is all I work with.
Okay. So it's quite astounding when I hear someone at a very young age thinking like, hey, my body's not right. I think, you know, maybe it's, as a guy, may be subject to different conditioning. I do remember as a sort of teenage boy thinking, oh, I'm skinny. And someone saying, oh, you should get to the gym. And like you are, you can't go till you're 16 or something. And someone else saying, well, of course you're skinny. You're 13. You know, your boys aren't generally butch, beefcake,
Right.
muscly monsters at 13.
13.
You know, they're generally pretty
Right.
skinny. But I do see that as just a tremendous pressure on women. Now the women listening to this might be like, well, of course. How would you explain that to me or a guy listening, like what that pressure on women can be like? Because while I do see it increasingly on young men, there does seem to be a difference in the amount of pressure that's there, and the ages we became aware of these things, I think, are indicative there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of women I've spoke to and a lot of my clients, it's somewhere around like 8 to 12 years old is when it seems to be that something starts to flip, meaning we start to become more self-conscious of our body versus like just enjoying our body or what does our body want and going for that. And I think that there's a myriad of reasons. I think one can be cultural, just expectations, even just, I grew up in Southeast Kansas, which is like the dead center of the United States. And I think just from even maybe what I saw in my small town, I think a lot of people can have from their family, even from inherit it from their mom, I think is a common, not necessarily mom telling. I mean, it could be just as direct as like, watch what you eat, or, oh, you shouldn't be eating so much, or, oh, actually even it can be the reverse of like, make sure you finish your dinner. But I think a lot of moms, of at least clients I know, were always dieting or always commenting about their body. And through observation, little girls are going to pick that up and then look at themselves in the mirror and wonder, well, then my mom's saying that she's fat, or if my mom's saying this about herself, what does that mean about me? That wasn't necessarily my case. But mine was a little more energetic, and I won't go into that, but it did, I think, a lot come from my mom. Her parents were severely critical of her weight. And like I mentioned before, she had 7 babies in like 10 and a half years. So of course her body changed a lot in that period. But I think it's changing now with social media and our phones. But back when I was growing up, which was in the 90s, it was more, magazines and like Teen Whopper. There was some, I can't remember the name of the magazine, but it was thin. I feel like the 90s was just this, like, at least in the United States, this like throw down your throat diet culture, like diet V8 juice, like sugar-free this. It was like diet. And like skinny was seen as this quote unquote ideal woman. And so I think a lot of us specifically as like, as women, little girls who were wanting to be loved, who were wanting to be accepted, who are wanting to receive approval, it's like, okay, I want to be this ideal woman. Because also, if anyone has in their own body journey, have had moments where you have lost weight, it's interesting to start to notice how people respond differently to you, often with like, oh, wow, you look amazing. What have you been doing? And comments like that can actually be really triggering for anyone who's had eating disorders, who has had body image issues. I think folks are normally well-meaning, but when you're receiving that kind of also attention, and it's validating, like, okay, I should just keep restricting, like I should keep trying to make myself smaller, because and there's a lot to it, but.
Okay, I mean, you said something quite key earlier, didn't you, there, that about your self-worth as a person not being linked to your shape. And I mean, let's really go back to basics here, because people listening to this really come from across the board, you know, in terms of some might be quite deep in the narrative and the literature. Other people were really, you know, we've had other people on in terms of intuitive eating and no diet culture and stuff like that. But other people may have missed those episodes. So like, if you were to like really you know, you're talking to, I don't know, so just the average person, not from Boulder, from Kansas or from rural England or Germany or whatever. Like, let's go back to the basics here. Like, how would you explain that often people's self-esteem or how they're seen in society is linked to their shape, right?
How would I explain that for someone?
Yeah, like what's the problem you're solving here? Let's kind of lay it out.
Yeah, I'm just sitting with that question of, so just to make sure I'm clear, what you're asking is maybe if I'm explaining this to someone who doesn't see a link to somebody receiving more acceptance or approval based on the way their body looks.
Someone even might not necessarily get what you're talking about. Like, how would you begin to explain this at Thanksgiving dinner to the relative who's not into personal growth or psychology or anything like that?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think I would start with even just, you know, have you ever noticed if has there been a period of time where you've lost weight and maybe people have started responding to you differently, or maybe you've gained weight? I might start with that just to bring it into a personal experience for them. And if they're like, no, my body's just the same, probably not my audience. And I would want to like support them in helping to even just start bringing light to this to help educate them. So they're maybe more aware as they're commenting on their partners or children's bodies of, you know, maybe asking, has anyone ever said something about your body or your shape? Or have you seen someone else that you hold in high regard and you've noticed you've compared yourself to them and you notice kind of this inner contraction? That's probably not a word that they would know. So maybe like cringe, or you notice you start doubting yourself or you start questioning yourself a little bit. I would try and find an example that's specific to that person that would help them start to, you know, find the correlation for themselves. So it's not just so out there and like talking from a large standpoint, and make it specific to them. But I think all of us, I mean, I would imagine, I don't want to assume, but most people have experienced that in some way, meaning somebody has commented about their body shape, positive or negative, and it's had a reverberating effect, whether they're aware of it or not. But if they're not, I would invite, you know, take a moment, take a breath, bring yourself back into that moment. And did you start to notice your thoughts shifting around yourself, like questioning?
I mean, I kind of think if I were to ask almost from any subsection of culture in Europe, are you happy with your body how it is? I think quite a small percentage of people would say they are. I'd say maybe 20%. I'm just making this up. Depends on the group and the age and the country. You know, certain countries are kind of more accepting than others, places I've been. But I'd say most people would say, kind of like I might, they would say, you know what? Yeah, you know, I'm okay, but I could do it losing 5 kilos. Could do it losing 10 pounds. You know, like, hey, I'm all right. I'm like a little bit skinnier than I want to be. Like a guy came to me the other day. He's like, hey, you know, you seem to have got musclier. How do I do that? You want to be a bit musclier. Or it might be, you know, most of the guys I know, it's like, hey, I've got a bit of a beer belly. You know, I'm 40 years old now. I've got a bit of a gut. If you could wave a magic wand, they would like to get rid of that belly.
Sure.
Right. Like, and that's, I'd say most of the people I know aren't happy with their bodies.
Yeah. And what I would not counter, but add to that and offer is my approach in my work is a little different than some people in the body acceptance and like intuitive eating world, meaning my focus is actually learning how to inhabit your body. And I really believe the more that, not in like an elite level or like there's a end goal of like, you're going to get there one day, but the more we can become embodied and actually be in our physical body, the more that is what leads us to accepting and loving our body as it is. And I believe you can accept and love your body as it is. And, you know, maybe there are things about your appearance that you don't fully love. So it's subtle, but it's an important distinction of, you don't, I do mirror work with my clients. It's not a huge part of my work, but maybe you are like, yeah, like I have a little bit of a beer belly, like a guy, or like, and I would like to, if, I could wave a magic wand and let that go. But when they really feel into their body, it is like they do accept themselves and they do love themselves. And it's, what's most important to me is also to support clients and not having that constant ticker tape, like that preoccupation, which I see steals so much of our energy, so much of our life force, that could be utilized to actually go into create things that are going to give you joy, to actually be present with your family. Yeah.
Okay. And what do you think is the real cost of that? Like if people are hating on their bodies, not inhabiting them because they feel gross in their bodies, they've taken on some sort of judgments, there's a better or worse kind of body. Like what's the real cost of that? Let's spell it out.
Yeah. I mean, I think the real cost is that, one, you're not going to be fully present in your relationships, because there's that constant, when you're eating food at especially with groups of people, if you're in some sort of high level judgment or dissatisfaction space with your body, you're probably going to be really like not actually present with your food, worried, am I eating too much? Am I eating too little? Not fully present with the people you're with, because that ticker tape is always going. I like, even when I talk about it, like I get like I can feel like this agitation building in my system. And it's like, at least I think it's just exhausting. Like anyone who has been in that journey or world, like it is exhausting to have like every other thought, or going out in public and constantly worrying, like, do I need to suck in my stomach? Right. Do I look big in this? It used to take me personally like 45 minutes to get dressed just to go out the door, not because I wanted to look so good and cute, but because most of my clothes I'd put on, I'd be like, no, that looks bad, or that looks bad, or I look stupid, or I look fat in that. And so I think the cost is really like, it's like that body hate is robbing you of really being able to enjoy your life. It's robbing you of not, like I mentioned, the presence with your loved ones, but it's taking energy. There's so much energy involved in that when you can start to shift that narrative, when you can start to, instead of disassociating from your body because it's been bad and wrong and the judgments, as you can start to be more present with what is, which is uncomfortable, and can be uncomfortable. But the more you can invite that, the more I feel like it's like bringing your energy back into yourself, so you actually have the capacity to do what it is you want to do in your life, right? Whether it be professionally in your career, whether it be like being more involved in local community service or service of some way with your family. Like there's so many things that, like, I think none of us, our life purpose isn't here to be like, oh, I just all my life tried to spend to lose 10 pounds.
Yeah, sure. And I say it can take a lot of energy, can take a lot of thinking. I've heard sort of more feminist orientated guests sort of say, hey, this is actually a way of sort of keeping women down, and particularly gives you no energy. You're constantly thinking about this.
Yeah.
And also as an embodiment teachers, it cuts you off from your body. Like, why would I be present to a body that disgusts me? Right. Yeah. Like there's a sort of link there with disembodiment the other way as well. Right. As you say, embodiment can be helpful to kind of love the body that you have. And another one, but it also works that if we have this shame about our bodies, I remember I was a BMC workshop, body mind centering workshop, and they were talking about inhabiting your fat. And half the room were sort of snickering, laughing, disgusted. And they hadn't done that when we did like skin or bones or muscles, they hadn't done that. And this was quite an advanced group of embodiment people even, but there was issues there for sure.
Yeah. That's interesting that's the response it elicited in that group of people. Yeah.
And I notice I'm still pretty conditioned by society though, even though I kind of go like, yeah, all different body shapes, great, we're born with different genetics and who cares anyway kind of thing, like I know I'm not going to look like, the one men always ask for is Tyler Durden in Fight Club. Apparently that is the most commonly requested body type for PT.
That's interesting.
And he's like 5% body fat in that. Like it's a massively unrealistic body fat for any guy who's not on PEDs or, you know, devoting, you know, if you're a Hollywood film star with a trainer and you dehydrate for that particular shot, it's just about possible, that kind of body fat level for a guy. And that is the most commonly requested one, apparently. And I know I'm not going to look like that unless I really devote a level of energy that isn't worth it for me. I'm just not motivated to, you know, and I do notice body shame. I do notice self-judgment. You know, sometimes I get up in the morning, it might be the first thought that goes through my head as I go to the bathroom, of like, you know, I look down as I'm going to the toilet and go, God, my belly's grown. And I don't think anyone's immune to this. So what would you say to people on the other end of the spectrum who are like, you know, embodiment people who still find themselves getting hooked by this?
Hooked by it, meaning like the example you just gave of
story of society that we have to look a certain way and we're better people if we do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. And none of us are immune. I think it's part of the human experience to some degree. And I find that those moments when I notice my mind going there, judging myself or judging my body, some old stories looking up I call them like road bumps sometimes, or speed bumps, but I think of them as actually opportunities to get curious, versus just being like, oh, here I am again, or, oh, I'm so bad, I'm not like embodied, or I'm not really into self-love because I'm having this moment of like shame about my belly, or like, you know, wow, I ate pizza last night, I'm bloated, right? Or, you know, whatever the story may be. I see it as opportunities to instead like actually get curious and, okay, is it just a blip of a thought? Is it as simple as that? Could be. Or is there like a little bit of a deeper reason that's triggering that thought? Meaning like, did someone say something to you yesterday, or have you been really disconnected from yourself? So I see them as opportunities to, instead of going into judgment, instead of trying to get really rigid with ourselves, instead of trying to be really harsh or like just overpower like our mind, just be like, I just got to think positive, instead of just to drop in and get curious, you know, say that example of you in the morning going to the toilet, like take a second in the toilet, you know, to breathe into your belly, instead of often we're wanting to contract, to shrink, to make smaller. Instead it's like, okay, I'm noticing some shame about my belly today. Great, that's fine. And can I actually bring my breath into that space? Can I actually invite my attention, my awareness, my energy into that space and fill it up, versus just trying to shrink it, contract it, and disassociate?
Yeah,
and I think
that's the idea. I don't like this part of me, whether it be someone's ass or someone's boobs or someone's belly. I don't want to inhabit it, right? Like that's the thing, the easy thing to do.
Yeah. And, you know, speaking of that, if all of this, if someone's like, okay, that sounds great, Emily, but I'm so far from wanting to be in my belly or my butt or whatever it may be, go into some more neutral body parts. You know, I often think of like our elbows. Our elbows are usually, you know, kind of neutral. I actually tend to actually love my elbows, which is silly, but I do. You know, or your knee, or, you know, find a finger, just finding a body part that's a little more neutral. Right, it doesn't have as much charge, I think is a nice, just easier access. Like you don't have to go to the part of your body you feel the most shame or dissatisfaction with, like go to where it's easy.
Yeah, people say, I hate my body. I said, well, do you hate your left earlobe? You know, it's very unlikely that's the part of the head.
Yeah.
You know, the kneecap. For me, as I kind of hit middle age, aging is also part of this, right? Like I had my first liver spots. Do you call them that in America? There's kind of like brown marks on your skin. They're not.
I'll call them sunspots.
Yeah. I think that's probably more scientific, actually. I had my first ones of those, like on my hands last year, my first ones on my face this year, on my head. And I was like, oh, I'm getting older, you know? And society also kind of really, it's a young, skinny body that's usually encouraged, right? Like if you look at the average sort of Hollywood acting, the average advertisement, whatever, it's not just a skinny body. It's not a 90-year-old skinny body, right? It's a young, skinny body.
Yeah, usually. And I think with this, you know, with plastic surgery, it's like becoming less and less. And I think of like Botox even. I don't know what this was like a year and a half ago. I was watching a couple of movies and they were like 20 years apart when they were filmed. And I just noticed in the more recent one, I'm like, none of the women's foreheads are moving. And this isn't to be like Botox or plastic surgery is wrong or bad. I think everyone gets to choose for themselves what is going to support them in feeling good. And I feel like there's higher levels of pressure. Yeah, not only to be thin, but to look young, to look youthful, to put all of this time and money and investment to present yourself a certain way that.
Yeah. I was in a drop-in yoga class in Portugal a few weeks ago, and the teacher had quite a lot of plastic surgery and Botox. And I just was thinking, like, as you say, one, each to their own. Who am I to judge? I don't know this person. And another part of me went, is this congruent for a yoga teacher? Is this congruent for someone who's teaching, getting in your body, feeling okay with yourself? Like, I'm not sure. Yeah. I think this whole don't judge thing can be taken too far, like I judge Hitler, we judge people.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and I think that's a good opportunity too, asking that question of more of making it a personal judgment versus like, it sounds like you're not just judging of this person, maybe more of like, is this somebody I want to take yoga from?
Right. Is this congruent with what this person's teaching? I guess there's a slightly more specific thing. It's not in any sense they're a bad human being. All right. So what about the emotional side of this? Because I've known we've had people talk about emotional eating before, eating your feelings, not wanting to be present. Some people talk about, cover people that maybe eat a lot because they're covering the body and somehow protecting something. What about the emotional aspect of this?
Yeah. I mean, that's like everything. I mean, I want to just start briefly with, I had a closure call with a client yesterday. So it's like really top of mind. And when we started working together, the idea of even dropping into her body or feeling into her body was a little triggering because she didn't feel anything. She was numb, and people would be like, well, just drop into your body before. And, but when she would try and connect with herself, she'd feel nothing. She'd just feel numb. And to the end, one of the things she shared with me yesterday was she now, like in any moment, can actually name what emotion she's feeling, overwhelmed, anxiety, and be able to just feel it and be with it without judging it and move it, like feel it in her body to help it move through. Versus, I think overwhelm was the one that she struggled with a lot and would lead to, because she has a really high stress job, at the end of the day, just overeating, numbing down. And so the emotional component is huge. For myself, I wasn't in my body most of my life. And so I have this idea, this theory, that there was like this void within me because I wasn't present. And I dealt with both ends of the spectrum with eating, meaning like from severe restriction to like compulsive overeating. But I think when that compulsiveness would drive, it was like I was trying to fill myself up. Like I was literally trying to fill myself up because there was this void. And I'm a teacher of a line of work called the Art of Feminine Presence. And one of my first 3-day weekend retreats with that work, we actually like inhabited our womb space, like the physical or energetic space. It doesn't matter if a woman doesn't physically have her womb, but basically that center point of your pelvis. And I'm going to bring this all into emotion, but I'm sharing that specifically because it was this really profound moment where for the first time I could like feel my enoughness from the inside out. Like I was actually filling myself. I was full. And what I found after that, and the more that I would practice that, the less drive there was to try and fill myself up incessantly with food or like just numbing in general behaviors. And so I think a huge key and this work and then this journey towards beginning to love and accept yourself more is one of the first things I work with all of my clients is beginning to identify how it is you actually feel. We spoke to, a little bit about worthiness earlier. And I think gifting yourself the time every day, maybe even ideally like multiple times in the day, to actually check in with how it is you're feeling, like underneath the surface. So not just like, I'm good, or like, I'm fine, or I'm kind of tired today, but actually what is it you're feeling, and asking in a way that is coming from a place of acknowledgement. It's not coming from a place of judgment or like, oh, I'm going to try and amp myself out of this state, right, into this like positive, joyful state. No, it's just like getting curious of what actually is. So often, because of trauma, because of conditioning, because of this also like high level need to like achieve and like produce results. I think a lot of us, we've like disconnected from how it is we're really feeling. And when you don't know how you really feel, then you can't know what it is that you really want or what it is you really need. And I think the more disconnected you are, the more you've suppressed or pushed down emotions of sadness, of loneliness, the more that starts to lead to disordered eating and disordered relationships with food. And food is just one substance, right? This could be happening for people with like TV, right? Like overly binging Netflix or show, or excessive scrolling time on your cell phone, or alcohol.
Right? It's
Yeah,
distraction.
any other, it's a distraction. But I think food is a common and primary one, specifically in regards to a history of suppressing your emotions, suppressing your I wrote a book called Radical Embodiment. And in the book, I speak a little bit of my own journey of my own sexuality. I was raised like very Roman Catholic, like no sex until you're married. I first started feeling like sexual around age 8, around age 10, and like being like, well, what the fuck do I do with this? Like, this is wrong, this is bad. And I really believe a lot of like me just trying to suppress the sexuality versus having a space to talk about it, to explore it, whether that be me and actually physically or not, but like there are ways of moving through that versus just pushing it down. But that led to so much shame, like so much shame. And to cover up all of that discomfort of shame, I would take my Christmas stocking into my closet and like close my bedroom door, close my closet door, and just like eat all the chocolate because I felt so wrong and so bad. And so to summarize and kind of bring this all a little bit together, going back to the worthiness again, I think one of the, if you're someone who doesn't like your body, and all of us have moments and blips where that may come up, and you're not feeling worthy of to have what you desire in your life or to have the relationships that you want because of the way your body looks. I think one of the best things you can start doing is some sort of practice every day that actually invites you into how it is you feel. I think that time is a gift. It's like you're gifting yourself. You're by acknowledging what's present, which I think is just such a huge sign to continually rewire that unworthiness. And like, you are worthy of taking 5 minutes. You are worthy of taking 3 minutes, of taking longer, whatever it may be, to actually feel into how you feel. So that's kind of a long, kind of a roundabout answer, but I think, I mean, the emotional component is key in regards to our bodies and our food. And it's a big piece of the work I do with clients. My always lens and landscape though is through the body. And so we're always tracking the sensations and emotions through the body.
Why radical? That's name of the book. Well, I mean, clearly some of the things you're saying go against a kind of mainstream narrative, but I'd love to hear your version of it. Why radical?
Yeah, I think it's radical because it is a radical choice that we make every single day consciously to continually choose to be in our body. Especially when, I mean, you probably just saw the AI generated images that just came out, which were really cool of people, right? Like, so interesting, cool. And it's seeming like a lot of things that are speeding up in our world are inviting us out of our body, right? There's not a lot of opportunity to, sorry, the trash is here.
All right, no stress.
But so I think it's a really radical choice to actually be like, I'm going to continue to come back into myself, even if there's discomfort, even if I'm uncertain, right? There's a lot of unknown when you're choosing to be in your body, when you're choosing to be with yourself. And like you mentioned earlier, Mark, about somebody who's in the embodiment world and feels pretty good, but when they have those moments of like shame about their thighs or about their stomach, and like, again, coming to the radical of like, we still, like, those of us who work in the embodiment world, it's a radical choice personally every day to come back and choose to be in this vessel. So it's not like I don't, you don't snap your fingers and are embodied like, oh, poof, I went to this weekend retreat, like amazing. I'm embodied. Like I'm always going to be in my body. I think it's a journey. And I think it is radical because you're going against a lot of what advertisements, marketing are telling you that you should do or what you should buy.
Yeah, the movement of tech as well. There's a certain movement, isn't there, towards kind of almost like transhumanism to get away from the body. When are we going to plug in? When are we going to have, the virtual reality? And it's also I'm just noticing it's just painful, like whether it's the heartbreak of being a human or the stress of being alive on the planet right now and everyone's nervous system shot with all the things going on. Right. Like I can see why people want out. Like God, if I feel that urge, I find myself playing a computer game to space out or overeating, and I'm pretty resourced compared to a lot of people.
Yeah, totally. And so I think with that, it's like so important for us always to be gentle and just be gentle with yourself. If you do choose, right, to like play a video game or numb out. I was sick over the weekend and I binged Saturday and Sunday. Did you ever watch the show Weeds? It was like 2007. It was on like 15 years ago. Anyway, okay. I just like binged it. It was actually amazing. It was like, I got to cancel all my plans, which I had been looking forward to, but there was something so indulgent about just not doing anything and just watching this show for an insane amount of time. So, I think that there's no wrong or right. There's a spectrum. I'm always curious about people's underlying motivation and their underlying motivating factor. And sure, it's fine to numb sometimes. There's nothing wrong. We are humans. We need to self-soothing is important. We're living in a really high stressed world. And how can we become more resourced? What are things we can start to do in small doses to support ourselves in having more resource and having more resolve underneath our, feeling a little bit more supported so we can navigate through life from a more empowered present place.
Yeah, I didn't think I self-soothed much with sugar until I was in Ukraine this year and they had a curfew at 8 p.m. So you couldn't leave the house after 8. Oh, wow. And so there's no Deliveroo, no Uber Eats. No, you can't even go to a shop because you'd be arrested for going on the streets. And there was a few kind of tough days and, managed to get a meal in, but then get home for 8 p.m, just finish work, kind of stressed, tired, been around a lot of trauma. And then I'd go, I really want something sweet. And there wasn't anything in my fridge and I couldn't get a takeaway. I couldn't go out. And then I was really like, fuck. And it really made me realize this is one of my go-tos, when I haven't got it, It's funny what exposes it sometimes.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah. Okay. And what about movement practice? I'm imagining you have a practice to kind of I know I went dancing this week. I did contact improv and I just felt so much more able to come back to myself afterwards, so much happier and healthier, human contact, freeing up all those stuck bits, what's the practice?
Yeah. So two big things are I'm a big fan of moving on the floor and rolling. Mm-hmm. There's more to it than that. So I'm a teacher of a form of work called Floor Flow, which is to support people in getting
Floor Flow TM, as some American branded it.
Yes.
Yeah. It's rolling around on the floor branded now.
Well, there's more to it than that. But then I also am a big animal flow. And so I was just at a mentorship in Greece there was, I think 64 of us instructors, 72 people, but from 21 different countries. And I love animal flow. So it is also all ground floor based movement. It's quadrupedal movement training. Great. And so part of why that rolling on the floor, animal flow is so important to me is it's so different than, and I regularly exercise. I do strength training. I live in Boulder. I'm hiking with my dog all the time. So nature is huge. But as far as one of my most fundamental practices that's becoming more and more so important to help support my emotional regulation is animal flow, is moving on the floor. There's something cognitively different that happens versus just a different, when I'm lifting weights or strengthening, that I really think helps just increase my capacity. Yeah,
there's something about all fours. I know Michaela Boehm does her practice usually on the floor. I find it's quite animal-like and it's very helpful. Mm-hmm. And then I like being on my back because a lot of my muscles can just let go. There's something about being
I think
raw
it's
that
so
just
to
enables a little
get
bit
that,
more.
like being able to connect more with the ground, right? The floor, the earth, if you're outside, that even can provide even a sense, it sounds like for you on your back, provides a sense of your body being held. So your muscles don't have to hold it all together as much, to give them an opportunity, to give your nervous system an opportunity to let go a little bit more, to surrender for a moment, by yielding into that support from the ground beneath you.
Cool. Before we wrap up, we've got a little time. Is there anything we haven't covered that's kind of key to your work that you think we should really touch upon?
Nothing. I mean, I guess what's coming brief, I was going to say nothing, but breath work has become an important component of my work in the past year for sure.
What kind of
And
stuff are you using to help people kind of inhabit their bodies a bit more?
what's that?
What are you using, sort of particular techniques from breath work?
Yeah, so the breath work that I'm trained to facilitate, and it's called like power awakening. It's more of an open mouth inhale, so it's a little bit more holotropic. And I could go specifically into that, but being that I work with females, it's awesome because I feel like we're like breathing through our pelvic floor, and it's a circular breath. And I do that with one-on-one or in small containers, groups of women. But even, there's so many different styles of breathing, right? So one of my clients has been working with an alternate nostril box breath, because of the high level of anxiety in her body. So every day she's been doing that to be able to just support her in grounding. But I'm finding breath work, whether it be breathing through your nose, box breath, this little bit more activating breath that I'm trained in, is so helpful in being able to just create a more embodied aware state. So I'm curious, I'm currently playing with juxtaposing like breath work, a movement practice, and then sitting into like a body-centered meditation. But our breath is so essential, right? It's with us all the time. And so it's so helpful in moving things through us, moving emotion through us, bringing more oxygen in and creating a little more blood flow in space.
What's something you've never shared in an interview before?
I'm going to say whatever comes off the top of my head. I really love my dog Tula.
I can see your dog behind your right
Can
shoulder.
you see her? Yeah.
Yes, and looking very comfortable on that couch. And this dog is living in luxury.
She is a luxurious dog. I mean, that's not like a private thing about me, but I've never shared an interview. Yeah, she lives a plush life. She comes to me to my office. All my clients know her. She's a sweetie.
Okay, I've got a secret confession. I had a secret love for country and Western music. So yeah, that's a secret.
In my high school days, I would drive 45 minutes to country town. My first parties were like literally like on the hay bale, fires. It was,
I come from the British equivalent of Kansas, so East Anglia is very similar looking. And
it's funny. That you brought that up. I don't consider myself a country music fan anymore. I used to be in high school, and earlier this year, I had this week. So I do a form of movement also called sensually embodied dance, which is, I don't know why with speaking of movement, that didn't come to me. It's a huge part of my life and my practice. But we did a country night where all the songs were country, and I was really resistant. I was like, maybe I don't go. And it was amazing. So I had this week where country just kept coming. One of my teachers, we did like a 20-minute breath work to country music. It was just so funny. This 1 week, it just organically kept coming. And I was like, maybe country's not so bad.
Where do people find you online? I've got your website in front of me, but do you want to tell people what's there, what they could get there? It looks like it's a decent site with a few freebies and things on.
Yeah. So I have 2 websites. Wishallwellness.com has been like my main website for years. Radicalembodiment.com though is the one I'm growing, and will have more of my up to date what I'm doing. And so, yeah, I have a freebie of how to stop the body hate. And so that's a practice comes with a really detailed PDF as well as a guided meditation where I talk you through step by step when you're in those moments of self-judgment, of feeling really negative about your body, how to actually stop that loop and come into your body.
Okay, there you are on Instagram as well, so people can find you there. Anywhere else where people should be looking for your stuff?
Those are, my website, Radical Embodiment, or Instagram. Emily_Wishall.
making sure we've got those on our notes for people. All right, good. And closing message about the body before we wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, I just hope that if there was something that Mark said or I said in this episode, in this interview, that drew your attention or hooked you in, to not forget it, to not just let it be a blip in your moment, to be like, okay, I'm going to work, I'm listening to podcasts, and actually absorb the information, meaning really let it land into your body in a way that can support you to continue to move towards truly celebrating the skin you're in, truly like coming to more and more of a place of love versus operating more from a place of disdain and hate.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone, for listening.